A gave B his watch to repair, but after repair, A refused to pay the money. B therefore retained the watch as security for his debt. A consequently steals the watch from B. Could A be charged for theft of his own property? Today we shall cover the offence of theft, which is dealt under section 378 IPC, falling under chapter 17 of the Indian Penal Code. Here we shall cover section 378 IPC, which defines theft. We shall cover the actus reus and mens rea involved in the commission of theft, the essential ingredients of theft, and the punishment for theft. Welcome to Law Cities, the mini law lecture series. First, the answer to last week's problem to ponder. This is a clear-cut example of abetment by innocent agent, isn't it? B, a lunatic, has dropped poison onto the food of C because of abetment of A. Here, by virtue of explanation 3 to section 108, B, because of his legal incapacity to commit a crime, will not incur any liability. However, this will not absolve A's liability. A will be held liable for abetment to commit murder. Clear? Section 378 first defines the offence of theft. The provision then goes for 5 explanations wherein the offence of theft is described better. The scope and ambit of the offence is clearly stated through all these 5 explanations provided in the provision. We shall cover each of them in today's video. First, let us find out what are the actus reus and mens rea elements in the offence of theft. Section 378 clearly says, whoever intending to take dishonestly any movable property out of the possession of any person without that person's consent moves that property in order to such taking is said to commit theft, which means the actus reus involved in the offence of theft is taking or moving the property for taking, and the mens rea involved is dishonest intention to take. Both of these elements are required to constitute theft. Now let us see each of these actus reus and mens rea part specifically. The actus reus involved in the offence of theft is taking. When a movable property is taken out of the possession and without the consent of the person, then it is sufficient actus reus for the offence of theft. Now the provision even adds on saying that taking includes even moving in order to such taking. That is, if a movable property is moved in order to effectuate that taking, then it would be equivalent to the taking of the movable property, which means such moving definitely becomes the actus reus for the act performed. The mens rea required for the offence of theft is dishonest intention, which is provided under section 24 IPC. We have covered what dishonestly is in one of our previous lectures. Dishonestly or dishonest intention means an intentional act to cause wrongful gain or wrongful loss. Now, what does wrongful gain and wrongful loss signify? It is defined under section 23, which says gain of property by unlawful means is wrongful gain. Here the person who is gaining the property is not legally entitled to the property involved. Whereas wrongful loss is the loss by unlawful means of the property. Here the person losing it is definitely legally entitled to the property concerned. Clear? So when there is intentional wrongful gain to one person and simultaneously intentional wrongful loss to another person, then it is dishonestly. Then it is dishonest intention, which is the mens rea element in the offence of theft. So both the taking or moving aspect along with dishonest intention constitutes the offence of theft primarily. So now you got a basic idea as to what the offence of theft is. Now let us look into the essential ingredients of the offence of theft as provided under section 378 IPC. The provision says that it should be a movable property. and that movable property must be in possession of anyone. There must be a dishonest intention to take it out of the possession of the person concerned, and it must be without his consent that the taking had taken place. And it also says that even moving in order to such taking would be a sufficient actus reus for the offence of theft. Now let us cover each of these ingredients in detail. The first essential ingredient is pertaining to the subject matter of theft, which is movable property. But what do you mean by movable property? Movable property is defined under section 22 of the Indian Penal Code. It says corporeal property of every description is movable property. Then the provision proceeds to certain exceptions, which are land and things attached to earth is not movable property, and things which are permanently fastened to anything which is attached to earth is also not movable property. Along with this provision, explanations 1 and 2 of section 378 IPC also say something about movable property, which is things that are attached to earth, which is generally not movable property, if severed from earth becomes movable property. And it says that severance itself is theft. Clear? Now let us consider this example. A cuts down a tree on Z's ground with the intention of dishonestly taking the tree out of Z's possession without his consent. Will that amount to theft? In order to ascertain that, you must first check whether a tree can be a subject matter of theft. That is, whether a tree is a movable property. Now, as per section 22, it is clear that tree is not a movable property because it is a thing attached to earth. But explanations 1 and 2 to section 378 makes it clear that a tree is a movable property because it says anything which is attached to earth if severed becomes a movable property and hence a subject matter of theft. Also, it says that the severance itself becomes theft. So either ways, the charge of theft would stand. Clear? Same is the case with stones, sand, clay, etc. because all those things are things attached to earth which can be severed. So these can be a subject matter of theft by virtue of explanations 1 and 2 to section 378. I hope you got it. Another important aspect to be covered in this provision is possession. Why? Because the main right that is protected by virtue of this provision is nothing but possession. Let us quickly examine the provision. Theft, as according to the provision, is dishonest moving or taking a movable property out of the possession of a person without his consent, etc., etc. Thus, possession is really significant to be understood when you talk about theft. What is possession now? It is not defined in the IPC, but the nature is indicated in section 27 of the IPC, which says when a property is in possession of wife, clerk or servant, it is deemed to be in possession of the person himself. Whatsoever, it is impossible to work out a precise definition of possession. The renowned jurist Salmon has once come up with a test to determine whether a person is in possession of a thing or not. And the test is whether he is in the general control of the property. If the answer is yes, then the person is in possession with the property, or else he is not. There are certain concepts which are very closely associated with possession. Studying the offense of theft becomes incomplete if these concepts are not looked into properly. So now let us find out what are they and what are their implications to the offense of theft. Let us first start analyzing this example. A is hosting a dinner party at his house and his guests are using his plates, spoons, forks, etc. Now the question is, who has got the possession over the utensils? Superficially speaking, yes, it is with the guests because they are using the utensils then. But law says they just have custody over the property and constructively the possession lies with the owner. Law labels them as de jure possession or possession in law. So even though there is no actual physical control, the person has possession over the property constructively, and that is why it is termed as constructive possession. When the law uses the term possession, it envisages this de jure possession and not de facto possession, which is mere custody possessions. Clear? Moving on. Now let us see what is the impact of temporary deprivation when considering the offense of theft. We know that theft is deprivation of property with dishonest intention. That is, intention to cause wrongful gain to himself and wrongful loss to another person. Now, if that is so, should time play any role in this? Law says no. The deprivation need not be permanent or for a considerable period of time. Even if it is temporary, if it was with dishonest intention, then it is theft and the time factor is immaterial here. Now let us see the implication of joint possession in theft. When there are more than one owner to a property, then we say that they are co-owners in joint possession to the property. If one among the co-owners takes exclusive possession of the property with dishonest intention, then law says it is theft. Even if that person had joint possession over the property, once he takes exclusive possession over the property without the other's consent with dishonest intention, then law steps in and says you are guilty. Yet another essential ingredient of theft is consent. Now the provision clearly says that moving or taking of movable property out of the possession without the person's consent only becomes theft. Now it does not specify as to what consent is, but explanation 5 to section 378 specifies that such consent can either be express or implied. Now we know what is express consent. If a person authorizes a person to hold some property, then later he cannot say that the latter had committed theft of that property. Isn't it? That is express consent. Now let us see what an implied consent is. Here let us consider illustration M to section 378. A, being on friendly terms with Z, goes into Z's library in his absence and takes away a book without his express consent for the purpose of merely reading it and with the intention of returning it. Here A had taken the book out of the possession of Z without his consent because he had implied consent to use Z's book, which was out of the friendly relation he possessed with Z. So in such case, law does not consider it as theft because implied consent is read in. Let us now learn what is moving as an essential ingredient of the offense of theft. The actus reus requisite for the offense of theft is moving in order to such taking, which means moving with the intention of taking is the requisite actus reus for the offense of theft. Moving is a very commonly used term, but in what aspect has it been used in the provision is to be found in the explanations. Explanations 3 and 4 to section 378 clarifies the term moving by adding certain other indirect ways of moving along with the popular meaning of the term moving. First, let us check what explanation 3 has to say about moving. It says a person is said to move when he actually moves the object, or when he removes an obstacle which prevented the property from moving, or when he separates it from any other thing. I hope you notice that the latter two ways of moving are in fact indirect ways of moving the object, but law considers those also as moving by virtue of this explanation. Let us now check what explanation 4 has to talk about moving. It says, if a person causes an animal to move, then he is said to move not only the animal, but everything in consequence of the motion so caused. Illustration C to section 378 clarifies it even better. A meets a bullock carrying a box of treasure. He drives the bullock in a certain direction in order that he may dishonestly take the treasure. The illustration says that he has committed theft of the treasure. How come? By virtue of explanation 4, when A has moved the bullock, he is not only moving the bullock, but also the treasure which is upon the bullock, amounting to theft of the treasure. Now let us see what is the punishment provided for theft in the Indian Penal Code. Section 379 deals with the punishment for theft, which says that a person who commits theft shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years, or with fine, or with both. And now on to the activity session. A respectable person took another person's cycle as his own cycle was missing at the time. Later on, he replaced it. Could he be charged for theft? The court in this case ruled that although the actus reus part of taking the cycle is present, the requisite mens rea, which is the criminal intent, was absent. The court said that the requisite mens rea, which is dishonest intention, was absent in this case. That is, this respectable person did not intentionally cause wrongful gain or wrongful loss, and therefore he shall not be charged for the offence of theft. Second problem, A steals the goods of B. Later, C steals those goods from A. Here, who will be charged for theft? Here there is no doubt pertaining to the culpability of A because the facts very well say that A had stolen the goods of B. The only confusion is with regard to C's act of stealing those goods from A, who is not the rightful owner. But Section 378 protects the right of possession and not ownership. Ownership is immaterial in this provision of law. Therefore, C's stealing those goods from A's possession without his consent happens to be also theft as per law. So, both A and B can be charged for the offence of theft. Third problem, A concealed B's watch, who is careless, for teaching him a salutary lesson of being careful. Is A guilty of theft? The facts here clearly suggest that it was just a temporary deprivation. For what? In order to teach him a lesson of being careful, which means his intention was to restore the property and not to cause wrongful gain or wrongful loss. Therefore, because it is falling short of the requisite mens rea of dishonest intention, A will not be held guilty of theft. Fourth problem. A gave B his watch to repair, but after repair, A refused to pay the money. B therefore retained the watch as security for his debt. A consequently steals the watch from B. Could A be charged for theft? Of course, we are discussing about the theft of A's own property, but B had retained the watch lawfully as security for his debt. Thus, B had a lawful possession over the watch. Also, the intention of A while taking the watch out of the possession of B was to deprive B of the watch. Thus, taking the watch out of the possession of B without his consent in order to cause wrongful loss is necessarily theft. Hence, A could be charged for theft here. That's all for today's video. Stay tuned to Law Cities for more lectures. Have a nice day.